Thank you for joining. Not the brightest day for Donald Trump. He just came off of his rally in, where was he today? In Georgia, of course, and he made a decision that wasn't exactly the smartest strategic decision in the world. So I want to not bury the lead here and jump right into what Donald Trump just did in Georgia that will invariably not help his campaign. Okay, so we're going to play this clip in particular, and there was a bunch of ranting and raving and the usual temper tantrum at his rally, the usual incomprehensible diatribes and streams of consciousness, but there was this moment in particular that I think is going to actually have legs in terms of what can hurt him in the future. So let's listen into what he said about Georgia's own governor, Brian Kemp.
But Kemp doesn't want to end it because he's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp, bad guy. But think of it. I got this guy, just think, and then that's it. I got this guy nominated, I then got him elected. Without me, he doesn't get nominated and he doesn't get elected. He had no chance of winning either one, and all he had to do is sign something where the Senate would like to look at election integrity. This is an honest man. That's an honest man. They were all honest. They were looking at something very legitimate. And this bad guy said, "I'm sorry, sir. I can't do it." I called him and I said, "Brian, they're looking at election integrity. Is there anything you can do?" "I'm sorry, sir. I can't get involved in that." I said, "But Brian, you don't understand. This is a good thing, not a bad thing." "I'm sorry, sir. I can't get involved." I've had you up to here, Brian. I've had you up to here. He's a bad guy, and he's not doing this country a good service. People are looking.
So that is Donald Trump doing what he'd begun to do in the last election, where he actually lost Georgia, and that is attack sitting Republicans because he feels that they're not adequately loyal. I should remind you right now that Brian Kemp won the state of Georgia in his last election 53.5 to 45.5. So this is a popular governor who is clearly garnering enough support from the Republican base to be able to vote for him and outperforming Donald Trump in his own state. The results for Donald Trump in Georgia in 2020 were, let's pull up those exact numbers right now. It was 49.5 to 49.2. So Brian Kemp ran about 5 points ahead of Donald Trump, 4 to 5 points ahead of Donald Trump. And yet what Trump is doing now in a state that he absolutely needs to win and could very well win is attack the person who has more support than him and thereby create yet another rift in the Republican base. The story actually gets a little bit more weird here. And I'm going to show you now what Brian Kemp's response to Donald Trump's rant was, because Donald Trump, of course, also posted on the Truth Social. So, and in his Truth Social post, he had attacked Brad Raffensperger, of course, for doing his job. So Brian Kemp's response to this was, "My focus is on winning this November and saving our country from Kamala Harris and the Democrats, not engaging in petty personal insults, attacking fellow Republicans, or dwelling on the past. You should do the same, Mr. President, and leave my family out of this." And that's because in the message below, he had attacked Brian Kemp's family. And so if you are looking for just a complete like black hole of dignity, you found it. It doesn't get worse than this. If you're looking for like an actual vacuum of dignity, it is in the Republican Party, where this guy can attack the family member of the sitting Republican governor. And the first response from that governor is, "Let's beat that guy's opponent." I mean, if you needed any other indication of the extent to which these people put party over everything else, even their own dignity, even what shred of dignity they have left, Brian Kemp is putting that on full display right here. I mean, it really does show the two biggest flaws of the Republican Party right now. It is the extent to which these people are wholly owned by Donald Trump and will grovel at his feet and show him nothing but undying, absolute fealty, and do so even if it shows exposes how little dignity they actually have as human beings. And the first part of that, which is just Donald Trump, who himself is the flip side and just requires, mandates absolute loyalty. And if he doesn't get it, even if it means breaking the law to get there, still he'll attack because that's all he cares about. It's not defending the Constitution or the rule of law or any of the other things that Trump and Republicans beat their chests about. It's not the things that their little bumper sticker slogans. It is just consolidating power by any means necessary. So it is their autocratic behavior and the rest of these Republicans just complete shrinking fealty to the autocrat himself. Two sides of the Republican Party right now. There was one small exemption there, and that is Brad Raffensperger himself, who was the subject of this attack. And you'll notice that Brad Raffensperger came forward and said in his own tweet, "Georgia's elections are secure. The winner here in November will reflect the will of the people." Here's the important part. History has taught us this type of message doesn't sell well here in Georgia. You'll think back to the runoff in Georgia, where Donald Trump's whole campaign during the January runoff in 2021 was predicated on this idea that the election was stolen from him in Georgia and that the whole thing was rigged. And what happened? Georgia went on to elect 2 Democratic senators because everybody had their faith in the entire system completely undermined on the Republican Party because they listened to this guy who was just ranting and raving and selling a whole bill of goods to Georgians to the point where he completely rendered them unenthusiastic about the upcoming election. And so this is exactly what's happening yet again. And Brad Raffensperger is being clear about that, and good on him for at least acknowledging. And look, this is not to applaud Brad Raffensperger because Georgia has some disgusting voter suppression laws that I've spoken about with Mark Elias. But the fact is that at least he can acknowledge objective reality and say, "Hey, man, this is on you. But if you want to start, attacking other Republicans and undermining trust in our elections here in Georgia, go ahead, but history has taught us that this doesn't work well here in Georgia." The very last election in Georgia is a testament to exactly that. And it actually got a little bit worse. I want to play another clip from this rally that I think kind of puts on full display the state of the race right now. And remember, this is on the backdrop of we are 90 days out. Donald Trump is slipping in all of the polls. People are energized about Kamala Harris. And it is time for Donald Trump to basically shit or get off the pot. This is his moment to really hone in on a message that he thinks is going to get him elected the next president of the United States. And in this final, closing gap here, in this final home stretch, basically these last 3 months where it's just do or die, this is the message that he's selling at his rally.
If Kamala Harris gets in, the travesty that is taking place at the Paris Olympics will come to America when we host the Los Angeles Olympics. And by the way, which I was president, we happened to get it. I was the president. I also got you a thing called the World Cup, which is coming very soon.
So that is his closing message here with 90 days to go, basically, that he's going to just lean in on anti-transgenderism and basically just continue to attack Kamala Harris in the immediate aftermath of attacking her for being black. The extent to which this guy does not know how to run against Kamala Harris is being put on full display every minute of the day. I mean, we've heard attacks from Fox News where they've claimed that Kamala Harris hugs too many people. We've heard attacks they're really just throwing spaghetti against the wall right now to see kind of what sticks. And the fact that they're saying you can't elect Kamala Harris because in 2028, we're going to basically lean in on trans panic, and you'll have all of the men at the Olympics competing in women's sports and all of women competing in men's sports. And that's their closing message in a general election here. Holy shit, these people do not know how to run against Kamala Harris. Of course, you had Trump just days ago claiming that the black candidate, in fact, wasn't black. And the reason she did that Donald Trump decided to do that, to lean in to this idea, is because he wants to try to drive a wedge between the black community which is a community that he needs to make inroads with, and also Kamala Harris herself. And so he's trying to basically claim that because she's biracial, Indian American and black, that she has nothing in common. She can't be relatable whatsoever to the black community in this country. The problem is that within the two demographic groups that he's trying to reach, which are people of color and young people, obviously people of color understand the very simple concept of biraciality. Many people of color themselves are biracial, so of course they understand what the hell it means to be biracial. And the other demographic group, which is young people, are inherently the most diverse group, generation in American history. So he's basically, talking to a wall here in terms of being able to persuade those groups in particular. This is not a good line of attack for Donald Trump, and that's being put on full display with, I spoke about this in my live stream yesterday, but Tommy Lahren has come out and basically said this is an easy way to piss an election away. Ben Shapiro came out and said pretty much the same thing, that we should be talking about more important issues. Rick Santorum, Bill O'Reilly, one after the next are coming out and saying this is really dumb, and this is a really easy way to lose the next election by digging in on just overt racism. But the problem is that Donald Trump is just so desperate for adulation from the people who are already in his camp, from the rabid right-wing Republican base, and he knows that by leaning in on racism against Kamala Harris. Remember, Donald Trump rose to power in his initial campaign in 2015, 2016 by attacking Barack Obama and launching the birther movement. So he knows that by saying this stuff, he's going to get a big applause line. And so he can't get it through his head that maybe don't say certain things, even though you'll get lots of adulation from your audience. Maybe don't say certain things because the rest of the country also sees you, who are not in this room, in this arena, cheering you on like a lunatic. And that's going to bode well. That's going to bode really poorly for you around the rest of the country. But he just can't bring himself to not do the simplest thing that's going to immediately result in applause and adulation and praise from the people who are immediately in front of him. And that's the most important thing to him. And so he's going to cast everything else aside because he just basically wants to be pet by his adoring fans. And so this is what we're left with, a campaign that is yet again focused on only the most rabid factions of Donald Trump's base and not expanding that coalition at all, even as at the same time he claims to want to be able to reach out to people of color and young people, and yet is launching attacks that are only going to serve the purpose of pushing those exact people away. I would think that there would be no easier way to push away young people and people of color than digging in on this idea that the first black female nominee for president of the United States is not black. I mean, we have eyes, right? You can see Kamala Harris. We know her background. We know that she's half Indian, half black, and so she's black. Barack Obama was black. He was mixed race as well, and nobody doubted his race. But this is all Donald Trump knows. He knows racism. He has a whole lifetime of practice with it, from denying tenants the ability to rent his units, to putting a full-page ad in the newspaper calling for the death penalty for the wrongly convicted Central Park Five, to claiming that he wants to do a Muslim ban against anybody who wasn't who was of that religion, and the examples go on and on. So this is what he has practice with, and also he just has an undying need for affection from the people who are going to cheer for stuff that is exactly like that. And by the way, the people who are cheering for him are not young black people who he needs; they are old white people who he's already got. And there was also one misstep in this rally that I thought was particularly entertaining, and that is they handed out signs that said, "You're fired," in big bold letters. But what you can't see on these signs, and that you really need to zoom in super light colored font, it says, "Lion Kamala, you're fired." But they made up those signs in such a way that you can't read the Lion Kamala part. All you can read is "you're fired." And then they all paraded themselves on stage, J.D. Vance, Trump himself, and stood in front of signs that said "you're fired." I don't know if that's the optics that they were going for in this final stretch, especially as Donald Trump and J.D. Vance continue to lose support and crater in the polling. But But I can guarantee you that we will not see these signs again, where again you can't even see the Kamala part. All you see in big bold letters is where it says "You're fired." Oh man, it's like everything that could possibly go wrong in Donald Trump's campaign right now is going wrong in the campaign. So with that said, I do want to pivot to discussing the Veep stakes because those are at a fever pitch right now. So why don't you throw me some questions in the chat, and I'll take this opportunity to answer some questions that you might have about the Veep stakes. In the meantime, for those who are watching right now, this channel is really close, like just over 10,000 subscribers away to 3 million. So if you're watching right now and you want to support my work, my live stream, or just help me reach the milestone that is 3 million, and maybe hopefully we can hit it either tonight or tomorrow. But that would be a great way to support what I do. It also doesn't cost anything. Nothing is paywalled on my channel. It never will be. That's just a great way to support my work. And of course, if you have questions, make sure to tag my name in the chat. Again, to be able to participate in the chat, you do have to subscribe, but it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. So just hit the subscribe button. Okay, let's talk about the debate for a minute because I am getting this question. Do I think that Kamala Harris will agree to Donald Trump's offer of Fox News on September 4th? And in any way, do you think it's possible they can agree to debate both days? I think that right now Kamala has the upper hand. Here's the problem. Donald Trump knows that he doesn't want to debate Kamala Harris. So what he's doing is continuously moving the goalposts. And so he's saying at first that okay, maybe we should add in a Fox News debate. And then his next post on Truth Social is like, maybe I won't do the ABC News debate. And then the next post is, okay, actually, when Biden dropped out, the ABC News debate is terminated. And then it's, okay, unless we do Fox News, then there won't be any debate at all. So the goalposts keep moving, with the natural conclusion of this being that Donald Trump doesn't want to debate at all because he knows that debating on Fox News is something of a poison pill. We're talking about a network that has just paid $787 million for lying in direct response to what Donald Trump was feeding them. This is a network that lied on behalf of one of the candidates who wants to get up on this stage. And before anybody says, well, it's Brett Baer, and so he's not Sean Hannity or Judge Jeanine or Jesse Waters. Remember, it was Brett Baer that wanted to take Arizona's electoral votes out of Joe Biden's column, even though he'd won them in 2020, and put them into Trump's column. He wanted to just call Arizona for Donald Trump apropos of nothing because he was bending to the pressure that Donald Trump was putting on the network for calling that state correctly. So let's not pretend for a second that Brett Baer is a moderate or even lends any veneer of legitimacy to that network, which is what I would have said before that. But he is just as much partisan hack as the rest of them. He just dresses it up in a more moderate outfit. But all of these people are complete hacks, complete right-wing sycophants for Donald Trump. So the notion that they should not debate on ABC News, which would be a neutral venue, because let's be clear, it's not like legacy media has ever been overtly friendly to the Biden administration. They've been complaining about the fact that they haven't gotten an interview with him for more days than I could possibly, more days than they've covered anything else. So this isn't, mainstream media is not overtly friendly to Democrats in general. This is an ecosystem that's promoted Hillary's emails breathlessly, an ecosystem that's promoted, the ideas that were put forward in the impeachment effort against Joe Biden breathlessly. There are a ton of these examples where mainstream media has basically just bent over backwards to allow the right to serve as its assignment editors, so it's not like ABC News is like the Biden campaign, or it's not like the state of California run by Gavin Newsom is sponsoring the debate. This is ABC News, which will be, I'm sure, even with ABC News, the first question would be about the border anyway. So let's not pretend that ABC News is some super friendly territory for Kamala Harris. So no, I don't think that Kamala should relent and do this on Fox News and just give Donald Trump everything he wants, and to allow them to fill the audience with Trump supporters so that he could feed off of that and give the impression that when his stream of consciousness, unintelligible ramblings fall out of his face and his audience of breathless sycophants go nuts that it'll give the impression to the general public that he's winning somehow. He needs all of these security blankets basically to present himself as doing well because he doesn't have what it takes to actually defeat her one-on-one. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the Veep stakes, because I'm getting a lot of questions about this. So, are any of the VP picks bad? That's a good question. The answer to that is no. I think we'll be solid with all of these VP picks. So, as far as reporting is concerned, we're down to about 5 of them. It looks like Tim Walz, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Pete Buttigieg, and Tim Walz, Mark Kelly, Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and possibly Andy Bashir. Of course, it could be more. Everything. Here's the thing. Everybody who's actually in consideration is keeping their mouth shut about it. So inherently, the reporting is going to be from people who don't know what they're talking about, because the people who are in on it, who don't, like the people whose offices are involved, for example, they don't want to do anything to jeopardize it, so they're keeping their mouths shut. The people who are willing to talk about it are people who aren't in those offices then and who have no vested interest and so don't really know. So that's my caveat for any of the reporting that we're seeing about the Veep stakes. But long story short, no, I think all of them are completely solid. Look, Pete Buttigieg is probably the best communicator that we have in the Democratic Party. He's an assassin when it comes to debates or speaking on any network, so he would be excellent. Mark Kelly, an astronaut, the most famous one of the most famous astronauts in modern American history now, is able to win in a red state or a purple state like Arizona. Married to Gabby Giffords, would be strong on gun safety, and also lives in a border state and could give something of a permission structure to people for whom the border is a major issue to kind of feel like there is a moderating voice on that issue. He has been moderate on the issue of the border, which can help him with the general electorate. You have someone like Josh Shapiro, who is polling at 61% in Pennsylvania, which is an absolute must-win swing state. Here's the thing. We win Pennsylvania, it's going to be very difficult to win the election if we're not winning Pennsylvania. That's what I'll say about that. Josh Shapiro is exceedingly popular in the actual state that we need to win. So there's that. Tim Walz has been an excellent communicator and surrogate for Kamala Harris, has presided over, as governor, one of the most progressive terms in probably Minnesota's history, with legislation ranging from helping kids have access to lunches all the way to voting rights reforms that we would love to see implemented across the entire country. So have I forgotten anybody? Andy Bashir, look, another Democrat who was able to win in a red state like Kentucky, an exceedingly red state like Kentucky. So all of these guys are great communicators. All of them have been great surrogates. They all have, strong records to run on, and a lot of them have appeal with the entire country, basically. So I don't think that there are any weak choices. I think that certain people can confer more benefits than others. Like, for example, here's what I would probably presume. I think that what gives me pause are 2 people in particular. Andy Bashir, because I think it would be really difficult to ever get another Democrat in office as governor in the state of Kentucky. And I think that, yes, he can win in a red state, and he's shown that he can win in a red state, but I don't think any more than any of the other guys on that list. I think that if we're looking for like a very electable white guy, I think most of that list, if not all of that list, are electable white guys. And so I don't know that it's worth taking someone like Andy Bashir out of a state like Kentucky when we're probably not going to be able to replace him with another Democrat. Then there is Mark Kelly, and I worry for the same thing, that we won't be able to replace him with a candidate who's as good. And he is an excellent candidate. Again, he is an astronaut. Like, it doesn't get better than that when it comes to Mark Kelly. And we would have to not only have a new candidate on the ballot when that Senate seat's up in 2028, but we would have a special election in 2026, which means we have to defend that seat not once with an untested candidate or somebody who may not be up to the level of Mark Kelly, but twice with a candidate who may not be up to the level of Mark Kelly. And that puts us on defense in 2026, for example, when we wouldn't even have to defend that seat in 2026. And, the Senate map is always difficult for Democrats because the Senate inherently favors the Republicans. So that is my worry about someone like Mark Kelly and someone like Andy Beshear. And I do think that we can have major benefits to somebody like Josh Shapiro when our primary goal right now has to be winning the general election. It's going to be really difficult to win the general election without Pennsylvania. It makes sense. And I know that people have worries in terms of his allegiance to Israel. A lot of the reporting is about his allegiance to Israel. I think as far as I'm concerned, all of these VP candidates have expressed their support for Israel. So I don't think that, it may be somewhat misplaced to attack Josh Shapiro for the Israel stuff. But I think more importantly, look, it's not going to matter if we have the most perfect candidate in the world if we're not winning. And if Josh Shapiro helps Democrats win, then that's what matters. And it's also not like Josh Shapiro would be dictating policy as vice president because he would defer to the policy of Kamala Harris as the president. Like, that's how it works with these administrations. They're not dictating their own policy. They advocate for the policy that's handed down from the top, and that's Kamala Harris. So there's that. There's also, when it comes to Pete, look, I think if anybody has shown that he can A, be an effective communicator, and B, has the experience from his time in the cabinet, it's hard to make the argument that there are people who may be more qualified than he is. So in all, look, it's there's no bad choices here. There's just good choices and better choices, in my opinion. But again, I'm open. I'm not. If there was somebody in this list that I thought was disqualifying as a candidate, I would say it. If there was somebody who I thought would hurt Kamala Harris or who's a complete, doesn't offer anything or would actually be a net neutral or a net loss, I would say that. I think of this group of people, all of them are going to be stellar. I think they're all great surrogates. They're all great communicators. They have a good record, and they're all going to be strong. Okay, let's go back to the questions here. I'm getting the question, how would this all affect Canada? I do know that we have a lot of Canadians in here. So what I would say is if Kamala Harris is elected, you'll continue to have a neighbor that acts as a functioning democracy, I think is the biggest thing. Is it just me or has the GOP establishment abandoned Trump in the last few weeks because of gaffes? I do want to caution against thinking that, look, it's clear that Trump's campaign is imploding, but Republicans are not discerning. They don't have scruples. It doesn't really matter what Donald Trump says or does. He can make fun of disabled reporters. He can make fun of women. He can make fun of minorities. He can attack people. He can call for the end of democracy and the suspension of the Constitution. And he can say he wants to be dictator of the United States. Most of these people, if not damn near close to all, will vote for him anyway. So I don't want to delude ourselves into thinking that he's not going to be a formidable opponent, because he is. But I think the onus is on us to do two things. It is to continue to elevate the Democratic ticket and Democrats up and down the ballot. And two is to continue to call out Donald Trump's gaffes, his cognitive decline, and his weakness here, because so much of Trump's appeal is this perception that he's a strong man. And for example, when he has this debate challenge that's posed to him by Kamala Harris, and he backs out and pretends that he can't do it for XYZ reasons and starts advocating for other days and other networks and giving poison pills, it just shows that he's scared. And like, this is supposed to be their alpha. This is supposed to be their strong man, their tough guy, somebody whose entire identity is predicated on his strong vibes, who can't even come out and continue to abide by the very debate date that he himself had agreed to when it was Joe Biden. Call him out for being weak, because it's not like he has it's not like he has any legislative expertise. It's not like he has any foreign policy chops. It's not like he is a good speaker. It's not like he has a good vocabulary. It's not like he's particularly inspiring. All he had was his vibes, was his tough guy vibes. And the fact that he's losing that last vestige of virtue that he could cling on to, what does he have left? And so keep hammering away at this idea. Not that he's, tough, but actually the total opposite, that he's weak, that he's afraid of Kamala Harris, and continued to like thrust into the zeitgeist here that he is not strong by any means, that he's actually just a weak guy who's afraid of Kamala Harris and won't even show up to debate her. Okay, let's keep answering questions here. By the way, we are really close to 2.99 million. So if you're watching this right now and you're not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing because we are very close to 2.99 million. So again, just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. With sentencing in New York in September and movement on the D.C. case, how do you think Trump's legal issues coming back into the spotlight will affect this election? I think that what we're going to see now in D.C. is basically a mini trial as they litigate all of the issues to determine whether or not presidential immunity applies to them. And so it's going to be as if there's a trial anyway, and there's going to be reporting on it on a daily basis, and what it's going to do is continue to highlight the difference that Kamala herself highlights on a daily basis, which is you've got one person running this race who has spent her life throwing into jail scumbags and sexual deviants and criminals and con men and cheats like Donald Trump. And then on the flip side, you've got Trump himself, who continues to be enmeshed in litigation. And let's be clear, this DC case is not going to be perceived the same way that the New York case is going to be, because this isn't campaign finance violations. This is crimes against the United States and the blocking of the electoral certification. And it's very clear. People understand what this is about. They recognize that this is a serious case, which is not to say that the New York case wasn't serious, but they recognize that this case absolutely is serious to a much greater degree. And now we're going to be able to litigate all of the issues in this mini trial, even if it's just to determine whether or not Donald Trump can actually be tried on those issues. So, I think it's going to just exacerbate these differences between the two candidates, and that's not going to redound to Trump's benefit in the slightest. Why aren't the news networks talking about the old guy in the race anymore? It's been crickets since Biden left the race. Well, that is how it works with legacy media. I think legacy media will take their cues, as I mentioned before in this live stream, from the right. And so when the right was screaming about old people being ineligible to be president, then the media more broadly was perfectly content to take their cues from the right and allow them to be their assignment editors and not want the old guy to be in the race. But then the old guy drops out of the race, and you have Donald Trump, who becomes the old guy. And by the way, he's only 3 years younger than Biden anyway. And suddenly it's gone because the right isn't talking about it. That is how the mainstream media and legacy media in this country allow themselves to be completely rolled by the right. The right knows how to game the refs in this country. And the problem is the refs never recognize it. And so we have a situation like this where, despite age being the principal concern for the last 2 years in this race, the second that we have one guy drop out, only for the other guy, who's just, again, 3 years younger, to still be in the race, now nobody wants to talk about it. So, again, allowing themselves to be completely rolled. Will they indict Trump in Arizona? Possibly. I mean, there is this case coming forward that is very similar to the RICO prosecution in Georgia that's happening in Arizona. So it's possible that Trump could eventually be indicted. A lot of this is going to depend on what happens in this next election. be forewarned. If Trump wins in November, he will use like some perverted interpretation of the supremacy clause to try to wipe away any indictments and prevent any prosecutions from moving forward. What do I think happens to MAGA if Trump loses again? Does someone else take up the charge, or will the cult of personality fade with him? That's a good question, and it's one I've been thinking about a lot. The problem is, I think that a lot of these people have been groomed to support politicians who act a certain way, and that is the way that Donald Trump acts. And so I don't think that it's going to be like in one of those movies how when you have the main zombie who dies, and then all of a sudden everybody who was under the zombie spell just snaps out of it like that. I think that this is what the Republican Party looks like now. There's going to be some, if Trump loses, there's going to be a reckoning where, you know, maybe they deluded themselves into not changing their ways after 2020 because they're still pretending that they won. Normally, if you have a candidate like Trump who is politically toxic and continues to lose, as he has been responsible for losses in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023, you would take that as evidence that you need to go in a different direction. The problem with this MAGA party is that by virtue of pretending that they won elections that in fact they lost, they're never giving themselves the opportunity to actually retool so that they can win the next time. They just keep pretending that they won. Carrie Lake still thinks she's the governor, and she lost like 2 years ago. She's running for the Senate. How can you run for the Senate at the same time that you think you're the sitting governor? And so, you know, I think because they've just convinced themselves that anytime they lose an election, it's fraud, then it's never going to give them the opportunity to actually say, okay, what do we have to do moving forward? How do we have how can we act? You know, how can we adopt new candidates? What new policies do we have to enact? Or adopt rather, how can our platform change so that we can win moving forward? They're not doing that. They're not giving themselves the opportunity to do that. They're actually screwing themselves over in that respect. And so do I think that all of a sudden there will be a different kind of Republican Party? Probably not, but there should be some type of reckoning if they ever want to win again, if Trump loses in this election. But really, the permission, the you know, there's really no permission structure to do that, or I'm sorry, incentive structure to do that, because these people want to build their brands. They know that they can make more money and gain more social media followers by saying insane stuff. And so you're not going to have people like Mitt Romney and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney who are running. You're going to have those people leave, and they'll be replaced by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Madison Cawthorn and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan, because those are the people who become stars in the Republican Party. Those are the people who make money writing books, because then those books get promoted on Fox News and OAN and Newsmax. And all of the incentive structure is to be those people. You don't get anywhere by being a moderate on the right. And so no, I really don't foresee a time where, you know, if Donald Trump loses, A, they're going to even accept his loss, but B, that they're going to become more moderate as a result. I think there's going to be some, you know, hopefully it shows some faction of the Republican Party that may actually want to win and may not just want to build their brands and engage in, you know, in screaming from the minority, because I do think there's a good number of people who just want to do that. They're good. They are effective as a minority party. They don't want to wield power, a lot of them. But I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of Republicans who don't care about that, who want to win because they fundamentally believe in things like lower taxes for billionaires. They're not going to get the chance to do that because they're never going to be in power. And so there might be some break-off faction. Who knows what we would see? Who knows what kind of realignment we would see moving forward if that was the case? Maybe we'll see some type of MAGA party break off from you know, a rhino Republican Party. Would either one of them win as some faction of the party they once were? No. But at the same time, they're not winning now either. So it remains to be seen what they actually opt to do at the end of the day. I think we need Shapiro as VP. He's a moderate that's also backed by TYT, and Nate Silver says he's the best for the Electoral College. Look, I think there's definitely a strong argument to be made for Josh Shapiro. And this is what I was saying before, is it's not going to matter how perfect the VP candidate is if we can't win. And Pennsylvania is the most important state. We don't win without Pennsylvania. If we're at a point where we are losing Pennsylvania, then we're probably losing more conservative states than that, even in the battleground states like Arizona and Nevada and Georgia. So really, the way that Pennsylvania works is like it is more democratic than all of those states. So if we're in a position in this election where we're losing Pennsylvania, then I don't see how we lose Pennsylvania but then also win more conservative states, more Republican leaning states like Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. And if we're not winning Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, or Pennsylvania, then we're not winning the election. So really, look, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. I know that there are people who don't like Josh Shapiro. And by the way, this is all hypothetical because he hasn't been chosen. But just for anybody who recognizes, that they may not be completely satisfied with somebody like him, our top priority has to just be winning. And it cannot be looking for perfection or imposing purity tests when it's not going to matter how pure we are if we're in the minority and allowing Donald Trump to run roughshod over our democracy. So that's my thoughts on this whole thing. I really don't care who it is. I think they're all going to be effective. As I mentioned at the top, I think all of these people are good choices. Absolutely. Like, I don't think there's anybody on that list who's bad between Andy Beshear or Tim Walz or Pete Buttigieg or Josh Shapiro or Mark Kelly. They're all going to be great. And they're all going to adopt the positions that are passed down by Kamala Harris herself. So we're not going to have to worry about some rogue vice president. That's how it works. The vice president and the rest of the cabinet espouse the policies or support the policies that are supported by the top of the ticket. So, a lot of these concerns are overblown, and I just hope that it doesn't turn into, a Democratic infighting at a time when we don't need it. So I will go ahead and answer one more question here. Let's see. Will Trump even be able to vote for himself if he's sentenced to jail? So the way Florida works is Florida will take its cues from New York, from the state in which, if somebody is a resident of Florida and that person is indicted and convicted in another state, Florida will match the rules of voting rights in that state as it relates to the person living in Florida. So, for example, New York would allow someone who is convicted to vote, and so Florida, in that case, would allow somebody who's convicted to vote because they'll mirror the rules of the state in which that person was convicted. Even if they were in a state that had harsher rules, I think Florida would still allow Donald Trump to vote because who's going to enforce that against him? And everything is subjective. And even if the legislature would have to come into session to pass a certain law just saying if your name is Donald J. Trump, you should be allowed to vote, then they would do that. So I do think that, in any case, regardless of his conviction status or his incarceration status, Donald Trump will be able to vote in the 2024 election in Florida. So we will leave it there. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you want to support the work that I'm doing, please subscribe to this channel. We are well on our way to 3 million subscribers, pretty damn close. Hopefully by tonight, we'll be at 2.99 million. So if you're not yet subscribed, please do me a favor and subscribe. And of course, if you want to support me further, I have a book that's coming out in 10 days now. And it's called Shameless, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, supports indie booksellers. That's bookshop.org. So if you want to support my work, you can pre-order my book, Shameless, as well. That is a great way to support me beyond subscribing to the channel. So with that said, thank you all for watching, and we will. I'll try to jump on and do another live stream tomorrow. Thanks.